So we had stopped at this slide where we said that a typical structure can have up to 1,000,000 elements, and it is not practical to calculate effective properties for each of them. Now, then we said one of the solutions is to you can group the elements into bin based on their second order orientation tensor and calculate the properties only for the bin and assign the bin to each. So rather than implementing the mean field homogenization for 1,000,000 times, by even if you do it 45 times, that is usually enough. So by now we know how to do the manufacturing simulation, how to do the mean field homogenization. Now let us see how we can do a component simulation, component level simulation, bringing all of this together. It is important to keep in mind that for such materials, you don't have a meso level. You have micro level where fibers and matrix is considered, and you have macro level where you are doing component level simulation. There is no intermediate layer because you don't have different lamina or plies in this case. Okay, so let us try to see how we can do a component level simulation of a part which perhaps looks something like this. This is a representative industrial part. We are calling it representative industrial part because it is not exactly an industrial part, but we try to design a part which will have holes and notches, uneven curved surface area, etc., which a real part might have. This is, we call this part Pinocchio because this, do you see this nose like structure?
Yes, sir.
This is the point through which it is injection molded. Okay, so you have a face, you have wall, you have holes, you have curved surfaces, uneven thicknesses. So this is very much like an industrial part reinforced by polybutaterephthalate 50%. Okay, so first of all, we did some tests to it because we want to see how the component level simulation, is it accurate or not. So a special test rig is designed where there are multiple pins where you are joining this part to the rig. So this is a pin if you watch carefully. Okay. Number 2 is my part. 3 is my load. The top view will look something like this. This is the load that we are applying. Okay. This is horizontal. This is horizontal. You can also have the vertical load. And if we put some black and white speckles, there is a high speed camera which is tracking how these black and white dots are moving. So based on that, you can calculate the strain at every point. This is known as digital image correlation. What this technique does is that you are able to correlate. So at very high speed camera, you are taking thousands of photo per second, and based on pattern recognition, you can tell how this black and white pattern is deforming. So you can calculate the strain at every point. So based on this, we calculated the load displacement curve, which look like this. Okay, these lines that you see. Can anybody tell me why this slope of the curve is very, very small at the beginning? Did you do bending test as a part of your undergrad studies?
Yes, sir.
So think about that and tell me why this slope. Anybody knows?
Static reflex.
No. Let's say this is my part in red, and in green is my indenter. Okay, this is my hint. So green is my indenter from which I'm applying the load, and the red in color is Pinocchio. Now, can you tell me why that is coming?
Clearance initial.
Yes. What happens now when you apply bending load, you are never going to get the full indenter contact with your specimen in the low steps. Initially, there's only going to be in some places contact between indenter and the sample. And after you apply certain load, then the contact is full. So this region that you see is due to this is very standard. This will always happen when you try to do bending tests, that the slope is going to be very low because contact between the indenter and the sample is not complete. And after some load, when the contact is complete, this is the actual load displacement curve, slope. Okay. So the first
Sir?
thing we did is we did the manufacturing simulation depending on the method that I have just described to you. This is the solution. So you are seeing the value of A11, means if A11 is high, more fibers are aligned along the X direction. If A11 is low, more fibers are aligned along the Y or the Z direction. So we see that in some regions, fibers are highly aligned in this direction. And in some direction, the fibers are highly aligned in this direction. And there are lots of regions in between. Highest A11 is 0.88, almost fully aligned. If this was 1, all the fibers would be fully aligned, and lowest is 0.298. In the other two directions, maybe the orientation. But by looking at this image, you can see point by point, the orientation is varying. Okay. Then we apply, then when we try to build the FE model, one very important requirement is how you are going to put the boundary condition. So we applied wherever, so if I go back a few slides, where my part was resting on the rig, we have constrained the movement perpendicular to the rig. Okay. In the pins, we have put a pin joint. So rotation is allowed, but YZ movement is not allowed. In all the pins, that is done. The sample can go up and down. The sample can rotate, but it cannot move in the YZ coordinate axis system of the pin. And this is my application of the load. And we have used TET mesh, as you can see. Now, this is the FE calc. So manufacturing simulation is done, boundary condition is applied. We calculate the effective properties at every point or for 45 points and assign local stiffness for every point. Feed that to our FE, and this is our FE result. We see that according to FE, there is large amount of tensile stress in this region, which is red, and high compressive stress in this region. Rest of these areas are more or less safe. Also, where the support was there you can see compressive stresses, which is expected. And digital strain correlation give me the strains at every point. We calculated strain at every line and we calculate. So this blue dotted line is the FE strain. This red line is my experiment. Can anybody guess why this offset is there? This is because in real life, the material is behaving in a non-linear manner. There is damage, and because there is damage, there is going to be loss of stiffness. Loss of stiffness means increase in strain. Our modeling is fully linear elastic, but the trend you can see is actually quite good. And we have, so we can say we have reasonable confidence in the manufacturing simulation, also in the mapping and the boundary conditions that we have applied. Now, so whatever has been taught in this slide so far is standard industrial practice. Everybody does that. This is well established software. Off the shelf, you can buy the software and you can do. Where is the research and development going on in this field? Research and development is how to predict damage, how to predict nonlinear behavior, how to predict fatigue. The orientation dependence of fatigue is non-linear. Like mean field homogenization, you can use for effective properties. You cannot do that for strength because you know that strength is localized. Stiffness is average. So average is calculating is easier. So this is where current state of the art is. How do we predict fatigue, damage, etc., etc. And by the method that I have just described step by step, recently Mann and Hummel are the tier 1 supplier to Volkswagen. They have designed the oil filter and they have presented this in a publication. this was the actual part. This is the actual damage that has taken place. So they tested it and then they did some micro CT analysis. These are the damages that they have seen. Exactly the same damage was also predicted by this framework, simulation framework that I have just discussed. Okay. So this is my summary. Typical design of composite parts will involve knowledge of different fields of mechanics. You need to know fluid mechanics, solid mechanics, manufacturing of composites, mechanics, etc. And you have to do lots of experiments before you have confidence for a certain solution. If somebody tells you that a part has been designed only by simulations, and by simulation he is very confident that the part will not fail, then you are best advised not to trust that person. The state of composites is not in a position today where we can say that a part is safe just by doing simulations. You will have to do a lot of tests, and lot of instrumented tests will have to be done. So with this, I am ending my case study. Any questions, comments on this? Yes. Is everything clear? Has anybody used digital image correlation so far? Anytime? As a part of your MTech studies, as part of your MOS lab, anywhere?
No, sir.
Has any? Yes? No, nobody has done. Has anybody done
No, sir.
some bending tensile test? Everybody has done, or you just observed a lab technician do it? How many of you had MOS lab in your undergrad studies? Nobody had?
Sir, we have raised the hands.
Achha. And you then did tests also yourself, or some technician did it for you and you could not see?
Technician, sir.
Yes, sir.
Technician, sir.
Also for the students at IIT Kharagpur, yes? I mean, both of them, MTech, those who did MOS lab in MTech, and I mean, those who did MOS lab at IIT Kharagpur, or those who did at different colleges, everywhere situation was same?
Yes, sir. More or less.
Okay. Not nice, but what to do? Okay. Any questions on this? On the case study?
Hello, sir.
Yes?
Sir, we use simulations to save from the test, but here we have to conduct test and simulation.
We have
So
to
what?
conduct test at least once. I mean, you do simulations to do parametric studies. You do simulation to find the optimal design. But at least for one design, you have to confirm that your calculations are correct. Otherwise, simulations will have very little meaning, because there is so much uncertainty, that you are never going to be 100% confident, especially in the field of composite materials.
Okay, sir.
Sir, in this case study, like we were considering single layer composites.
No, multi-layer, it can be as many layers as you like, or
But
actually there are no layers. There is no meso level. It is micro, fiber and matrix, and then you do the manufacturing simulation, and you can get multiple layers like this image one minute.
So like in industrial level scale, we won't be having this layup sequence and all that.
In injection molding, not.
Okay, injection molding. So like in injection molding, the matrix will flow and then it'll carry the fibers with it.
Correct. You still
Okay.
might have different layers, as I have shown in this slide.
Okay.
But all that is taken care in the manufacturing simulation. You don't need to actively put your layup sequence, etc. There is no meso level.
Okay. So it depends on the manufacturing method we choose.
Correct.
Yes,
If you are
okay.
not laying up, then how can you account for layup? In
Yes,
this
yes.
process, there is no layup.
Okay.
Sir, in case of composite parts where we don't know the direction of forces or something, or the random vibration is there, which one we should use? The short fiber composites or, I mean, directional ones?
The main issue that you have to keep in mind is there are, like we discussed very early on in our class, now that it is a multivariable optimization problem, right? I mean, you have to think whether there is cost benefit, whether you want to build multiple parts in one day or you just want to build one part in one day. What type of load are you expecting your part to take? So it's not straightforward. It's actually, there are multiple things that you have to account for before you can be confident that yes, I want to do this or I don't want to do this material or that material.
Okay, sir.
I mean, we are clear, we will use short fiber composites only if I have a situation where my material is being used for semi-structural applications. If it is used for any other application, then it is not interesting for us, not interesting any longer.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir,
Yes.
that means decided fiber orientation based on that stresses value from FEA model, but their strain should be same for deciding.
Come again. So whether to confirm whether or FE is accurate or not accurate depends on the level of analysis you are doing. Sometimes it is okay if your FE analysis will identify the hotspots. Hotspot means the area which is prone to failing. Sometimes it's okay that the trend is being captured, but the exact value is not captured. And sometimes you want very precise comparison. So it depends on what assumptions you are making, what sort of accuracy you want. Because we have not, keep in mind that material nonlinearity is not implemented in the industrial practice as of today, whatever I have described. If somebody wants more accurate, then he or she will have to implement material nonlinearity also. This is also one reason why we will not have a situation where just by simulation a design will be finalized.
Sir, you said about fiber orientation based on that
Yes.
stresses value. How that you decided?
Which one?
You said something about fiber orientation based on the stresses value from FEA model.
No. Wait, let's go to that slide. So where is that? You are talking about this slide?
Yes.
In this slide, actually, we are showing, so let us go to our simulation framework. We are showing the result of this box. Is it visible? This box.
Yes, sir.
So manufacturing simulation gave us detail of orientation at every point. We calculated the static properties based on software Digimat, which is fed to the FE solver. So FE solver, in my FE solver, if I go to that, every element has its own property. Every element has been assigned a separate property. Okay? And every element has a local stiffness. Based on the local stiffness, which is a function of the fiber orientation tensor, on the boundary condition and the load that we have applied, the stresses have been calculated. Clear?
Okay, sir.
Anything else? Any other question? Anything else? Or should I go to the next topic?
Sir, just a random question.
Mhm.
Sir, suppose we want to design a cover or something like, suppose we have a JCB machine and we want to design a cover for the radiator of for that. So what should be our design approach for that? I mean, first we should manufacture that part, then do the testing, then we do the FE
No,
simulation.
first you'll do some FE simulation, try to see whether a design is ballpark. I mean, predicting the stresses in the same ballpark. Right? I
For
mean, you do
suppose,
it, suppose you make a design, your FE says it can take load up to 10 and you want the load up to be 12 or 8, then you're okay. Then you might do some tests, etc. So, and also the question is, are you trying to come up with a new design? Or are you
so,
trying to...
sir, suppose you want to have the same design that a metallic counterpart has.
So first you will do, 1 minute. So first, for the metallic part, you have the complete design and the stress analysis at your disposal.
Yes, sir.
So first you will do analysis only for your metal part. Try to
Yes,
see if your model gives you the same predictions as that for the metal.
Right, sir. So, but how
Then
to
you have
decide that?
I mean, for your metal, you already have the data, right? Your metal, your part is already ready. You can already do the test.
Yes, sir.
That it must have been done on the basis of some design criteria that you already have. So first of all, run your FE, try to build a model for the isotropic metal. Try to see
Yes,
if
sir.
the boundary condition, meshing, etc. is okay. Then once you are confident of those FE details, then you will start to try to think of a composite design where you'll input fiber properties, matrix properties, etc. And then perhaps after some iterations where you think that maybe this design is giving me low stress, you build that part. And then you confirm your whatever hypothesis, whatever FE results you have got. And once
Yes,
you
sir.
have result for a composite and a metal part, then, and your FE model is correct, then you are very sure, then you can do parametric or optimization studies. Because one thing you must keep in mind that the optimal shape for an isotropic metal part might not be the optimal shape for an orthotropic composite material.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, at the end of the day, at least one set of tests you will have to do. You will have to validate your FE model. Then once you are confident, then you do parametric optimal studies. Once you get your parametric optimized configuration, you build that, you test that, and then you are sure that your part is actually doing as intended. That would be the complete cycle. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Now my slide is behaving a little bit strangely. 1 minute, let me fix it. One minute, I'm trying to look for something. It is somehow not showing me. Okay, I got it. So can I go to the next topic that I want to discuss?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in my case study also, I have said that there is not 100% confidence in the simulation of composite materials as of today. That we need to do some tests. There are some, it will require some test validation. So in order to see where the level of simulation is, we also have studied by now damage modeling, correct? And we studied that there are multiple damage models and people are building more and more damage models every day. So now the question that should come to our mind logically is then which damage model is better? Which damage model should I use when? Correct or not correct? Is that a question that comes to your mind also? Should
Yes,
I
sir.
use help? Should I use help
Yes.
insight? Should I use Abacus, Hashin failure criteria? Because if you look, if you do a thorough literature review, there actually are hundreds of models that are around. So to find out which model is better than the other or where do we stand, 20 years ago, there was the first round of the worldwide failure exercise. After that, there has been a second round and a third round is ongoing. So in this worldwide failure exercise, what was done is that people were trying. So the organizers, they conducted a series of tests and they published the material and they published the loading type. And different people who have developed the theories of failure were invited to run their simulations based on the data that is given, and then they would compare which model is accurate, which model is not accurate. Okay. So this, and based on this, they were trying to bring together all the theories of failures that are there. So how did that go? Let us have a look at that. This will give you some insight, some perspective on how, whether the failure criteria you studied in the class you can 100% trust or not. So the presentation that I'm going to make today is completely based on a presentation that was delivered by the organizers of the worldwide failure exercise, and they made it public. So I have borrowed their presentation and we will discuss that today. Okay. So the title of the worldwide failure exercise was Failure Criteria in Fiber Reinforced Composites. Can any of the theories be trusted? Okay. So this was conducted in 2001. As I said, the first failure exercise was 2001. Second, third one is ongoing currently. So the objective is to establish a benchmark. And the method was, first of all, the organizers identified the leading failure theories for fiber reinforced laminates, and they tested the general applicability across a range of problems. The theories were compared against each other and also against experimental evidence, and then conclusions was done. The idea is that let us close the gap between academic world and the design world. So there was 4 criteria based on which the failure exercises was conducted. The first one was predicting the biaxial strength of UD composite within 10% of the experimental value. Second is slightly more difficult, predict the biaxial strength for multi-directional laminates to within 10% of the experimental value. So you have UD, then is multi-directional, and then you have to predict the deformation in the multi-directional laminates within 10%. Finally, predict all the general features like mode of failure, etc., etc. So a large number of tests was done. The loading was declared, the material type was declared, but the strength was not declared. The people who have developed the failure criteria were challenged to predict the failure strength within 10% of the experimental value. And more or less, the data plots look like this. So these markers are the experimental data that has been shared. The different lines are based on the different failure criteria that different people, the different participants who participated in these tests. For example, red line is by Puck, blue is Hart-Smith, the dotted line is by Edge. And based on the biaxial strength of a uniaxial composite, this is what they found out. These different parts are, the name of the different failure criteria that took part in this exercise. You will see that there is no Hashin criteria. I will tell you towards the end why they did not participate in this. Okay. Biaxial state, this is stress ratio, sigma 1 by sigma 2. And green means the model predicted correctly. Red means it is wrong by more than 50%. Orange is 10 to 50%. So for a simple case, unidirectional composite subjected to biaxial loading, there are many models which are accurate. And especially if it is 1 by 0 or 0 by 1, meaning uniaxial loading, there are many models which are quite accurate. But as you increase the biaxial strength, there are many, in fact, for some biaxial loading, none of the models were accurate. Now, when you do it for multi-directional, meaning it is not only 0 degree, but 30, 90, 55 degree, then you see that then the predictions, they fall even worse. That there are some models which were completely off, and there is no one model which was able to predict correctly all the different cases. In fact, there is not even one model which is green and orange for the entire data that was provided to them. And if you look carefully, sometimes, and these numbers that you see is the number of the prediction divided by the actual experimental strength. So if the number is 0.225, it means that if the experimental data is 1, this model predicts 0.225. So if you watch carefully, that it is seen that some of the established theories of failure are off by as much as 600%. And there are very few theories of failure for very few cases, which is within the plus minus 10% that you would like. Okay, what does this tell you? What if you look at this table, what is your first reaction?
So failure theories are not reliable.
Not reliable. That's why you have to do tests at the end. Once the part is designed, you have to demonstrate your design by a test completely. Okay, and as you increase the criteria more stringent that you want deformation, then it gets even worse. For example, if I have hoop strain for 45-degree glass fiber reinforced, almost everybody is off by more than 50%. In fact, this failure, Chamis failure criteria is off by about 2000%. It predicted 4.4 and the actual strength was 100. Echold is off by a factor of 20. It's much better to throw a dice than to use theories of failure. But this was 2001. Okay. So basically what they found out was that none of the theories of failure was accurate enough. Okay. It provided designers with guidelines on accuracy and bounds of applicability. That what is the, how much can you really trust these theories of failure? It brought together different members of the community together. Okay. Most important achievement of this worldwide failure exercise is the final bottom point. That based on the results, 50% of the theories were modified by the different researchers. They understood what was wrong. Widely adopted theories were modified for the first time. This was the first exercise where it was comprehensively proven that our theories of failure need some improvement. And the modified theories are now being embedded in the numerical software packages. Not the theories of failure, which was prior to 2001. So now in the second exercise, third exercise, now we see that we are getting better and better with our theories of failure. But it is still work in progress, and still in composites, there is enough uncertainty that if there is a theory of failure, if a part is designed only by simulations, most people would be nervous about using that part. You have to, as a designer, as a manufacturer, you have to prove it using proper tests. Okay, so this is the different window of the Abaqus software that we have discussed, that there is Hashin failure criteria. These are the different inputs that were needed. Abaqus is perhaps the most common software that is used. Surprisingly, Hashin did not participate in the worldwide failure exercise. If you see the list of names, Hashin is not here. Hashin was invited, of course, but he refused to take part. And this is the email that he has written. My only work in this subject relates to failure criteria of unidirectional fiber composites, not laminates. I must say to you that I personally do not know how to predict the failure of a laminate. And furthermore, I do not believe that anyone else does. Despite Professor Hashin's opinion on his own failure criteria, this was implemented in commercial software Abaqus. So, what is your reaction when you see this email and then with the fact that this criteria has been implemented in the software? It means that just because something is implemented in a software does not mean it is accurate. Okay, academicians, professors, they'll tell you, look, this is not right, and then industry might still want to adopt it. But to be fair to Abaqus, they did not only implement the Hashin failure criteria, progressive damage has been included. So Hashin failure criteria plus progressive damage maybe works, maybe doesn't work, but the professor himself who developed this criteria has very little confidence. This was in 2001, maybe he has changed his mind, but it's unlikely. So simulation is nice, modeling is nice, but believe that only with some skepticism. You should not blindly believe whatever simulation results that you get. Okay, so with this, I will end the very small discussion on the worldwide failure exercise. Any questions on this? This is remarkable, no? This reply by Professor Hashin and the fact that it has been implemented in the software. Does this not surprise you?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
what is
Yes, sir.
the second phase?
The second worldwide exercise, I think, as they say in this one, that most theories got adopted. They got slightly better,
What are the results like?
but still, I don't think it is. It has reached a stage where any one failure criteria is green for all the test cases. That has still not happened. It might become a mix of green and orange. The red might have been eliminated, but still, yeah, it is not all the failure criteria. Any one failure criteria for all the loading types in green color, we don't have that yet.
Sir, we can do comparative study for various point through these theories, na, but
That is what was the point of exercise. Na? That this is what this table is telling you, that if your hoop strain is for 55-degree glass fiber reinforced, loading ratio 1, Sun's criteria is very accurate, size criteria is very accurate, Wolff's criteria is not so accurate, Chami's criteria is not so accurate. This gives you a comparative statement.
Sir, if we incorporate this different theories for different type of loading, then also we can't say that it is foolproof, right?
No, you cannot say that. You will get slightly better. Probably there are some papers and some researchers where it is recommended that if your loading type is this, if this is your material type, perhaps you are better off using this failure criteria. So that sort of advisory papers do exist. But it is not foolproof. You still will have, at the end of the day, once you have decided on your part, once you are confirmed that that is the optimal part, you have to make it and you have to test it to prove it. Nobody will believe only simulation results. And this is only for unidirectional lamina. That I have a laminate, each laminate has all fibers aligned in the same direction. If they are short fiber composites or injection molded, that is out of scope for this worldwide failure exercise. Their error might be more, might be less, we don't know. Okay, any questions? Okay, then I think we'll wind this lecture up. One of the points is that one of the winners, so one of the failure criteria which managed to escape this worldwide failure exercise with least damage to its reputation was the one by Puck. If you see, generally, Puck got the least damage to its reputation, and Puck failure criteria has also been implemented in software ANSYS. So ANSYS has Hashin as well as Puck failure criteria. The Puck failure criteria we will discuss in the next class. So tomorrow we will have a quick discussion on the Puck failure criteria, and then we will end our discussion on the damage. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, any questions or can I close this lecture?
Sir, in composite,